something I saw in a student says it all. A student came to our new house and stood on the ridge and just looked out over the valley. It was a student in their first year of medicine, actually. And I said, well, is everybody ready to eat? And he said, no. And I said, well, really? Because, you know, students, free food, those kind of go together well. And he said, because I never get a chance to just stand and experience just looking, doing nothing, looking over land, and not having to answer my cell phone, Twitter, Facebook, email, Skype, and he just started listing these things down the line. And it helped me to see that this student, who's not even yet in the thick of a career, is already experiencing that inundation of activity and noise. Now, I was raised, as you know, with a father that has American Indian background, and there's a real solid belief that your life needs to be without a lot of noise, at least part of the time. So this presentation I'm giving now is about rest. And you see the words there, seeking Sabbath in a hurry-up world. Everything about, especially America, how we live in America, is how you can do it faster and more efficiently. And I get caught up in that too. So I want to talk to you about how to work against that in a society where everybody is moving the other direction. It's a very difficult. All right. Sometimes we're told to rest. In other words, you might have a boss that says, you need to take a vacation. Or you see the signs here that say, rest here. Sometimes we're told to rest, and that's kind of nice, actually. Sometimes illness tells us to rest. That's not so nice. But sometimes there are times in life where we are told to rest, and we have to rest. Sometimes we're invited to rest by an empty chair, a park, by someone who says, as my fiance does, let's have some tea. He's all about drinking tea because he's Scottish. And he always wants to sit and drink tea. And what that means is, let's rest. And it's interesting because a European sense is a little bit different than an American sense about resting. Sometimes we make our own choices. We rest with family. You see the little baby resting without, he just can't help it. And actually, I was like that a little bit this last week with having had this bike accident and being medicated. So you all didn't even know, my first 2 days here with you, I was pretty much medicated. And it's like your body's resting when you don't want it to rest. You see a man resting in the field. Sometimes we try to just think thoughts that are restful. You see that a lot in mindfulness or attentiveness. I put Chick-fil-A in there because they've decided to rest their restaurant on Sunday. They have made that commitment. It's a spiritual, religious commitment, and they don't open their restaurant on, for them, their Sabbath, which is Sunday. Sometimes we have a day set aside for that rest, whether we go to church, read scripture, or experience rest within prayer. There are all different ways that people are resting. But what I'd like to talk about is how we understand rest. Now, I'd like for us to look at this poem and ask, what makes this a poem? To the left is the poem, and to the right, I've stated it outside of a poetic framework. Okay, so we'll read the poem first. I love Neruda. I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you straightforwardly, without complexities or pride. So I love you because I know no other way than this, where I does not exist, nor you, so close that your hand on my chest is my hand, so close that your eyes close as I fall asleep. Beautiful, isn't it? Now here's how it might be said if it weren't poetic. I don't know why I love you. My love is simple and unselfish. You and I respond to each other well. Now, what makes that first one a poem? Because they're saying the same things.
It's kind of like the difference between facts and story, but the poem has emotion. There's character behind the words, whereas the right is just facts.
Right. You're absolutely right. We have facts on the right. We have narrative, story, emotion, and all the things that come with narrative on the left. The other thing we have is poetic form. I love you without knowing how, when, or from where. There's a rhythm to it that the other one doesn't have. And you read the last line, so close that your hand on my chest is my hand, so close that your eyes close as I fall asleep. There's a rhythm there to it. And poetry has rhythm. It has different kinds of rhythm depending on the poetry. Sometimes it's A, B, A, B, you know, the lines. Sometimes it's A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, and back to A, B, A, B. But there is a rhythm to poetry. The words on the right do not have a rhythm. Now, I'm just going to take a name, and you tell me which one has a more poetic sound. I'm going to take my own name, okay? I'm going to be hard on myself. Carla Gober is my name. Now, I'm going to change it just slightly. Carla Gober. Tell me which one has a better sound, a better rhythm.
The first.
You think the first?
Well, it depends where you're from, the way you say it. For me,
There's something else I'm doing, but it is the way I'm saying it, but tell me if you tell the difference. I'm going to say it again. Carla Gober, Carla Gober.
You said Gober.
I meant Gober, sorry, I made that mistake.
Yeah.
So it's Carla Gober or Carla Gober. Now you know my name, so try to divorce yourself from that, but which one has the better sound? You think the first? Let me do this. Carla Jackson. I should have had this done ahead of time. Or Carla Park. Carla Jackson, Carla Park. You think Carla Jackson? Oh, this is so interesting. It has to do with where the emphasis is on syllables. Carla Gober has a hard first syllable both times. So it's not technically as poetic as Carla Gober, where there's a first and a last. The accent is on the first and the last. Do you see what I'm saying? So Carla Gober is hard. First, you know what? Carla Gober, it has a more rolling sound, Carla Gober. So you're not stopped in the middle. We might have differences on my name and how it's pronounced. What I'm trying to have you hear is the syllable and where the syllable comes. Or the second illustration, Carla Jackson, is 2 syllables, 2 syllables. Carla Park is 2 syllables and then 1. It tends to have a more poetic sound if you mix the amount of syllables than if you put the same amount together. So Carla Jackson is 2 and 2. Carla Park is 2 and then 1. Am I making sense? Okay, so I'm just trying to have you listen to where the strong syllables come, where the amount of syllables. Those are all go into making something more or less poetic, and either it rolls nicely or it's a more choppy. When I said to you she had suffered much at the hands of many physicians, it has a much more poetic sound than to say she went to doctors but didn't get well. Do you see what I'm saying? She suffered much at the hands of many physicians. It has to do with where that accent is and how many syllables there are on each of those sides. Whereas she went to the doctor and didn't get well, Actually, I tend to try to make these poetic, so it's hard to show you. But are you getting a little bit of a sense of when something is poetic? It has a more rolling sound. The accents are different. Then you look at the way the poem is written. See how the lines are, see how it's centered? That particular poem is centered. So in every way, the thing on the left is more poetic. All right, now let's look at music. How many of you play an instrument? Okay, so tell me what would happen to music if there were no rest in the music.
Running down the road without, to be boring.
Exactly, you just hit it. It wouldn't be music. So the rests are what make the music, which is interesting because there's no sound at all. So the rests are what create the form of the music. That we're going to do this sound here, wait a second, then do this sound here. And so you have these different kinds of rests that help you know how the music should be played. All right. I'm suggesting that one of the purposes of rest is that it creates an aesthetic piece. It gives it structure, rhythm, form, and beauty. Okay? And we're just working out of those two things. Sort of poetry, the same thing with art. It's the relation between what is painted on the piece of paper and what is left blank. It's that relation to space and picture that creates the art. Yes?
Yeah, I just want to just step back a little to the first slide.
Yes.
And that is, to me, that's how it shows how two persons relate, a man and a woman. Normally for men, we're not so very poetic. we are to the point, you know. Ladies like to be that, but one of the things that I learn in a relationship is that that's how she is, and in order for if I want peace or I want to be able to live together, I must be able to adjust when she starts her poems.
Okay, well now you're on a different topic, but let me address that just quickly. I'm going to agree with you partly and disagree with you respectfully on part. So here's the part I agree with. Men and women are different. And their ideas of romance are different. But I wouldn't push it so far as to say women are more poetic, and here's why. And you'll be doing this in your modules, and so I have a lecture on this, but I'm not doing it for this class. But you will be doing it in your modules. You'll be taking the Kiersey Bates temperament test and finding out what your personality type, what your temperament type is in relation to being either NF, NT, SP, or SJ. And don't worry about all those letters. You'll find out what those are all about if you don't already know. There are temperament types that are more poetic than others, whether they're male or female. So that's what that difference would be. But the part that I do agree with you, Jerome, is that they view romance often differently. But even that is tempered by temperament.
Yeah, and then men we don't like too much details. We just like the summary.
It depends on your temperament. Depends on your temperament. Some men want the details. So it depends on your temperament. And you have no idea how much I would love to launch into that lecture. That is my favorite lecture. All right. Now we're on to the second one. What makes sleep important? You've talked a little bit about sleep. You have a little boy who's just found a place to sleep, and he sleeps. And you have heard some of the sleep deprivation problems. But the thing I want to point out in sleep is that what was already mentioned is that sleep is not passive. It's active. You're not doing nothing. That's kind of a two negatives there. But if you look at the brain on the right, that's what your brain looks like in REM sleep. So the areas that are red show that it's more highly activated than in normal sleep. Now here's what's interesting. The area to the right that is REM, looks almost just very similar to your brain when you're awake. So your brain during REM sleep is very active. But the difference is, and now look at the image to the left, you see that there are 5 stages of sleep, and 75% of your sleep is the non-REM, stages 1, 2, 3, and 4. 25% is REM. The difference between REM sleep and being awake is that your body, your muscles, are more paralyzed. So your body can't respond to what you're actually viewing in REM sleep. Thank goodness for that. Because you imagine yourself, running and somebody's chasing you, but you can't get away. You physically can't because your body is numbed and your muscles are immobilized. But that brain is active. And what is it active doing? As you've heard a little bit, it is very active putting pieces together. Why did that go there? And how? And trying to connect the reality with how you perceived it. Putting those pieces together, very active. And in a very general sense, we could say your brain during REM sleep is trying to make meaning of everything it just saw in the day. That is the meaning-making time. So we could say that the purpose of rest refreshes us for more work. That's the simple part. Your body's relaxed. But then that bigger part is it's putting those pieces in place. And finally, the largest reason is it gives meaning to your life. Meaning to reality is what it's trying to do during that time. Of course, you're doing that when you're awake as well. But during REM sleep, it's trying to do that in an unconscious sense. So that's the second purpose of rest. Now we'll look at a third in terms of your heart. Your heart, you see the EKG here, and you've probably seen these when you're in the hospital. Where is rest taking place in relation to this EKG?
Before the 2 spaces before the big spike, and then after.
Exactly. So if you look at that the space between the 2 spikes, which is designated as R, that's right, is that resting. And if this were a physiology lecture, we'd get into even more because rest takes place slightly other place. But let's not worry about that right now. So rest is taking place between the beats of your heart. So if you have a higher pulse rate, which you do when you're not as healthy, so you look at what's healthy pulse for your gender and your age. When you start getting into the higher pulse rates of 70 and 80, then you're not resting as much. And then if you go into tachycardia, which is at the bottom here, this ventricular tachycardia, which is a very dangerous type of heartbeat, then you see there's no resting, basically. And that's why that's so dangerous. There's continual heart beating without any resting. And you see that there at the bottom right. Okay. So I'm going to talk about that, and then also so the heart, just as an organ, has to rest between beats because it can't work continually. So just hold on to that thought, and then we're going to talk about the sigh. I love this little cartoon. Garfield sighs, and then he says, well, why not show some enthusiasm for life? And so he sighs big. A sigh can mean so many different things, and you can look here. You see the man on the upper right, the sigh looks like he's just had it. The sigh over here looks like a man who's just laid down on the table, and he might be waiting for a massage, he might be waiting for the doctor. It's just like, but he seems more relaxed. As the woman on the bed here, she's just, her head is in the pillow, her cats are all around her, and she's just got, her sigh is just deep into the pillow. This woman here on the left, you can't see it, but the title of this is called Sigh of Relief. So her tears, it may be that the husband that she thought was in an accident is okay. Who knows what that is? And then we have a sigh here of anxiety. A sigh means so many different things, but the one thing it does mean is the truth. It means that something very truthful is taking place there. Whether it's the sigh of frustration, the sigh of I've had it, the sigh of I'm tired, I'll just relax. It's a real, true part of you when that sigh comes. So whenever I see someone sigh, when I'm in counseling or working at the bedside, I'll say, could you talk to me about the sigh? And very often, a very different story comes out there. So, purpose of rest, number 3, truth and integrity. Meaning that is the real true piece of you comes out in that sigh, that place of little miniature rest. And I put integrity because I'm talking about that true part of you, that part you can't hide comes out in the sigh. All right, so what does this Sabbath have to do with rest? When we look at creation and the text around creation, we see that after God created, it says, and God rested from all his work, right? Okay, now, the question is why? First question, was he tired? So he had to rest? Was he happy? He wanted to celebrate? As we might do after having a baby. It's so fun watching a woman having a baby. She is so mad sometimes at her husband. I helped deliver a baby once, and the woman said, "You did this to me. I hate you." But as soon as her baby was born, oh, they just gathered around and they were kissing and hugging, and the baby was right there. Is that what was happening at creation? That there was all this work? And they said, you know, the baby's here, it's all done, let's celebrate. Is it a formation of aesthetic peace, meaning that something happened all through creation and that everyone stepped back and said, isn't it beautiful? Isn't there a certain rhythm here? Isn't there a certain poetry here that's just absolutely unmistakable? All right. What might be the connections between ceasing work, celebration, and an aesthetic piece? Now, some people not only don't see the connections, they're letting the connections go. She's saying our grandfathers called it Sabbath, our fathers called it Sunday, we call it the weekend. And that just shows you kind of what a transition has been in time. And because I remember when I was a kid, there were many more young kids than I were keeping a Sabbath of some sort, not watching TV, not doing things. Even if they were, keeping a Sunday, it was kept very similarly to the way Sabbath keepers do, but not now. And then we talk about calling the Sabbath a delight. Well, what's delightful to some people is not delightful to others. So then we have all these arguments about what should we do on Sabbath? What's right to do on Sabbath? I want to look at just a few texts. Exodus 28 through 10. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor, do all your work. But on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, your livestock, the sojourner who is within your gates. There are many things happening here, but I'm going to pull out 2. One is that Sabbath is connected to memory. It's saying remember the Sabbath. So that means that all through your life, all through the week, you're supposed to be remembering the Sabbath. Remembering to keep it holy. Remembering that all this time is just a prelude to something really wonderful and beautiful that happens at the end of that week. Second, that it's connected to ceasing from work, but not just you, all those around you. Well, one might say, well, wait a minute, what kind of control is that? Why do I have to control the people around you? That's not what it's suggesting. It's suggesting that you are controlled by your environment, by your context. And if everybody around you is anxious, then guess what? You're going to be anxious too. So if you want to say you shouldn't go shopping on Sabbath, it's probably, the biggest reason is probably not because you're there buying something. The biggest reason is probably because you're around a whole lot of anxious people. People who are trying to find their parking places, beating you to it, mad because you got theirs, and trying to get you to hurry through line, and you can't find what you're there to get. That's much bigger than the simply handing over a couple of bills. You see the difference? It's saying put yourself in a context where you can rest. If you are in that kind of context, then resting is a lot easier. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. So we're looking at Sabbath as an acknowledgement of you try to get rest in so many ways. You try to get it through sex. You try to get it through going to see the psychologist. You try to get it through taking a vacation, and then you find that you're having to take a vacation from your vacation. You try in every way to get rest, but I'm telling you, says the Lord, I am the only place where you can truly get that. All right, then we look at Hebrews. We have all these Israelites that have traveled, trying to find the land of rest. And Hebrews says, for he has somewhere spoken of the seventh day in this way. God rested on the seventh day from all of his works. So, and then it states later in verse 9, so then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Well, wait a minute. These people, many of them made it to Canaan. So they made it to some type of rest. So then what kind of rest remains? What is it that there's still more of to happen with the Lord? For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Now I suggested to you earlier in our discussions that wholeness begins now. Did I not say that? Yes. And I'm suggesting that we can rest now. I'm going to undo it just a little. As much rest as we might find in this world, as much as we might enter God's rest, meaning to give ourselves up to God, to cease from pointing to our own works, as much as we might do that, we are still within a context, a worldly context of hate and exploitation and activity. And then God is saying to us even there, while a bit of heaven can begin here, it isn't until I put you in a different context that you'll really be able to rest. So while heaven might begin here, we can't experience the fullness of it until the context around us is resting, as we rest with each other on Sabbath. Okay, so the purpose of rest is the symbol of complete rest in God, resting from our works, but then that larger rest of being in a whole world of people who are all resting at the same time. Can you even imagine what it would be like? So in other words, it's like there is no going shopping. It's all rest, and even in a shopping context. Okay, so let's look at our conclusion. Rest provides the structure and the rhythm. And for any of you who have lived part of your life without a Sabbath, and I have because I wasn't raised as a Sabbath keeper, you know that incredible difficulty of going, and then going, and you never have that day where you just stop. And people who go from not keeping a Sabbath to keeping a Sabbath were like, wow, this is like a whole change of rhythm. And your body starts looking forward to that day. And sad to say, many Adventists have actually ruined their Sabbath by making that the day when they do the most cooking, the most church work, the most activity, and that is not what we were designed to do. That's right, meetings, we were designed to stop, to rest. And if we are experiencing that kind of activity on Sabbath, then it's just truly not a Sabbath. So we've got to go back and capture what does it mean to have a Sabbath. It gives meaning and puts the pieces together as sleep. It suggests that we should live in truth and integrity as the sigh. It symbolizes complete rest in God as the Sabbath, righteousness by faith. It projects onto the future that there is a time when the whole context will be restful. So, when we're sleeping, when we're keeping Sabbath, when we experience the sigh, all of those things, all of that is symbolic of that larger rest that we will someday experience. So keeping Sabbath, as some have compared it to wearing a wedding ring or something that symbolizes that commitment to God. That's what that Sabbath is that space where we say, we acknowledge that without you, we have no rest. We are an active people. We are a people that are completely restless until we find that rest in you, in stopping, in resting. Any thoughts about what I'm saying? Any questions?
It's beautiful. It's just, I feel like resting right now.
Well, does it make you want to change in a way sometimes the message we give about Sabbath?
Yes, definitely.
You know, this isn't just a day to go to church. This is a day to have a different rhythm.
Yeah.
This is what should provide the rhythm of your entire life. That's a different message than just don't work and go to church. It's a completely different message.
I think I share in your experience. I became an Adventist just about a year ago.
Yes.
And then just the change, I feel that things have fallen in place. I used to think that I was very busy and I was running in New York. In Brooklyn, I was attached to a United Methodist Church there somewhere. And I used to work from morning to evening. Sundays, I did a lot of things. And the rest of the week, it will also, follow like that. And you feel that you have not had just the sense that today is designated for something like this.
Yeah.
And just that sense alone, I think, brings some kind of rest to you. And then it regulates the rest of the week for you in a very wonderful way. You see that you have really been somewhere and you are beginning things all over again.
Yeah.
I think I share in that experience.
Yes, thank you, Mom. Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful, I like the way you put it together. But one of my struggles, and I think not just I alone, is the many meetings. I have this meeting at the department here. I have so many, and it's getting so, you wonder, sometimes at the end of Sabbath, I'm tired, really.
And here's my question, Jerome. Why are we putting so many meetings on Sabbath? But why do you think? Why are we doing that? Do you know why I think? Yes. You're so right. I think very correct. That is that we don't have time because our work is so important. We're now adding those things onto Sabbath and still calling it Sabbath. But it's no longer Sabbath. It's no longer Sabbath. So, if you decide from here that you are living your entire life, that you are living the Sabbath rest through the rest of the week, then you look at your Sabbath and ask yourself, is this, the way I'm keeping this, going to provide the rhythm, the kind of rest that will carry me through the week, and not just the week, but a life? Because that's what the Sabbath is about. It's that rhythm and that acknowledgement of God as the place of rest. And so if you're not doing that, if we're not doing that, that means that what we're carrying into our life is just more activity. You've just, in a committee, you've just ordained more work for the week. Yeah. So it takes adjustment and reevaluation.
You do committees on Sabbath, Jerome?
Yeah, it's just a lot of things. This church is a big church, 1,300 membership. So just so many meetings, elders meeting, different committee. It's kind of
Well, and it's not just meetings. And I don't want to be too hard on this because I do a lot of speaking for churches, but a lot of times your enrichment, your Sabbath enrichment things are all Sabbath afternoon. And so you go from church, you eat quickly, you get back to the meeting, and then you go to Vespers, and then it's only after Sabbath that you relax or have a board meeting. Yeah, so even though it's filled with good things, it's filled. And we're losing the ability to just stop and rest, because it's
We forget that Adam and Eve weren't doing bad things. They were doing good things, and they rested from good things.
Yes, they rested from good things. Absolutely. And actually, that's a wonderful note to end on. We may not so much need to rest from bad things We might need to rest from good things.